I've had an idea for a new feature that I would like to incorporate into our colors example. I've already started this new feature by including a new checkbox up here in the kind of the head section of the page, and I'm calling this checkbox the dark mode checkbox. What I'd like to be able to do is I'd like to be able to check that box, and instead having my page be predominantly white and light colors the way it has been up to this point, I would like for people to be able to check the box and have the page instead turn dark. Some people might prefer a darker experience for looking at their lovely colors rather than having the light page that we've designed and worked with up until this point. In order to facilitate this dark mode, what I've done is I've created a new style sheet. I call it the dark style sheet. And essentially what it does when I include it after my other style sheets is that it overrides a lot of the color selections that were made in the earlier loaded style sheets. So we instead get a dark appearance. If I refresh now with that dark mode style sheet, you can see that it's different color choices. This is what I'll call my dark mode. So really what I would like is I would like for there to be a way that checking or unchecking that checkbox determines whether this style sheet gets loaded or doesn't. That would generally be something that could be handled fairly easily through JavaScript. I could set up a little bit of JavaScript so whenever the checkbox was checked or unchecked, we could then make something like an AJAX request potentially in the background for this extra style sheet, or possibly just go through and swap out some colors for some different colors in order to make everything appear dark. But one of the tricks to this is that if I check the dark mode checkbox on one page, whenever I go to another page, I would like for that page to also know that it needs to appear in the dark mode, in the dark style. Any page I go to when that box has been checked should show up in the dark style. Conversely, if I uncheck the box at any point, then any page I go to after that, I would like to know that I don't want the dark mode. I'll want it to go back to the light appearance instead. What I'm thinking in order to get this to work is potentially using a cookie. What the basic idea would be is that anytime I check the dark mode box, I would want to have a request sent to a page on my PHP server, which would then result in a new cookie being created. I could then set up all of my pages so that anytime any of them load, they would look for that cookie. And if the cookie is there and says that dark mode should be on, they could load that extra style sheet and they could recheck that box. So when we're in dark mode, the dark mode checkbox will appear as checked. So there's a handful of different things that I'm going to need to do here in order to get this to function. One of the first things that I might want to throw in order to start this along the path to actually working is that I'm going to actually throw in some JavaScript code. The point of this JavaScript code is basically to tie me into that checkbox. I could have avoided this JavaScript entirely by making that checkbox a part of a form and giving that form a submit button. But what I would like to happen is I would like anytime I check the box to have the box being checked basically being sort of a form of request being sent, almost like a form submission. So for my checkbox itself, which I've put here in my _template file, which is the foundation of every page on my site, so it was an easy way for me to get that checkbox to appear on every page, I've put the actual checkbox in itself, and the checkbox has an ID of dark mode. What I'm then going to do here in my JavaScript is when the page is loaded, I'm going to retrieve my dark mode checkbox, and then when the checkbox is clicked, if the clicking of the checkbox resulted in the box being checked, what I'm going to do is through the browser, I'm going to send a request to a new page I'm going to put together called darkmode.php. When I send that request to darkmode.php, I will send it a couple of URL parameters. One of them will be a mode parameter, which I'll set to on. The other thing that I'm going to send it is I'm going to send it the current page's URL. I'll explain more of that here in a second. Whenever the clicking on the checkbox results in the box getting unchecked, what I'll do then is again redirect the browser through JavaScript over to my dark mode page, but this time I'm going to set mode to off and I'm going to give it the URL of the current page. So essentially, every time I check the box, it'll act a little bit like I clicked on a hyperlink. It's going to take me to another page. The other page it's going to take me to is my dark mode page here. But all I really want my dark mode page to do is I want it to send the instructions required to make a cookie. Basically send back an empty response with just headers in it, and those headers should tell the browser make a cookie, which will then say whether dark mode should be on or off. When we actually do then go back to the actual page itself, a page that we can view, not just this essentially empty dark mode page, I want the user to be returned back to where they were previously, which is why I'm sending the URL of the page that they're on at the time they actually check the box. So if I check or uncheck the box while I'm on the index page, I'll want my dark mode script to return me to the index page. If I check or uncheck the dark mode box while I'm on the new page, I would want to then be returned back to my new page again. So we're making a temporary detour to another script called dark mode. The dark mode script will put together the instructions to create a cookie. It will then send us on our way back to where we left from, back to the page we were on when we check or unchecked the box. When that page then reloads, it'll be when we're on that page that we'll then look for that cookie and decide whether to enable the dark mode style sheet or not. Let me go ahead and try it as it is right now. I already have my dark mode page put together here, although it's basically blank at the moment, but let's try it in the browser and see what happens. So in the browser, if I go ahead and refresh what I have at the moment, if I check my dark mode checkbox, the JavaScript takes over and it sends me over to my dark mode page. The dark mode page right now simply isn't doing anything. So let's take a look at what we might want to do on the dark mode page. The main purpose of the dark mode page is that I want it to put together the headers that are required in order to create a cookie. So I'm going to want to use the setCookie function that we've talked about. I think I'm going to tell it that I want to make a new cookie called dark mode. I'll just stick with that basic name. And then for the actual value of that cookie, it could be on or it could be off. So I may have a cookie, I may not have a cookie. If I do have the cookie, it may say dark mode is on or it may say dark mode is off. The actual on or off for dark mode, I want to get that value from the mode of the URL that I passed over to this page. So mode on or mode off. So on my dark mode page, let me go to my get array. That's a get parameter that's being passed, and let me tell it to access the value of mode. So mode will be on or off, and that will then become the value of my cookie. If I stop there with my cookie, what's going to happen is I'm going to create what's called a transient cookie. That's essentially going to be a cookie that expires and is deleted the next time the browser is closed down. They're also sometimes called session cookies. In this particular case, the nature of this particular feature, I think that if a user turns on dark mode, it's probably because they want to keep dark mode on possibly forever, or certainly for a time period outliving the current browser session. So I think I'm also going to set an expires date for this cookie. In order to set the expires date, I'm going to call PHP's time function, which will return the number of milliseconds that have occurred since the epoch. Basically, I believe it's midnight January 1st, 1970. Number of seconds since then, if I'm remembering right. But then I think I'd like for the cookie to actually expire maybe a year from now. You can think of the time function as a way of saying now. So I'm going to say, in addition to that number of seconds, also multiply 365 times 24 times 60 times 60. So 365 for the days in the year, 24 hours in a day, 60 minutes in an hour, 60 seconds in a minute. Take all that, multiply it together, that should be the number of seconds in a year, and I'm saying add that number of seconds to how many seconds it took to get to right now. So hopefully that will result in an expires date 1 year from now. So all of that together then hopefully will create my cookie for me the way I want it. Once that cookie is actually created, I then want to send the user back to where they were. So I'm going to put together a header function call where I'm going to specify a location. And the location I'm going to send them back to is going to be the location specified by the current URL parameter that was passed from my JavaScript. So here, where I put together the current URL parameter in the JavaScript, specifying where the user was when they checked or unchecked the box. I'll use that value here in my header function to send the user right back to where they were. Last thing I'm going to do then is just to call exit to make sure that this script is done, nothing else comes after it. This should then essentially send back a response with a set of headers to the user's browser. In those headers, there will be instructions telling it to make this cookie. There will also be instructions telling the browser to make a new request for this page. When those headers are received by the user's browser, the browser should create the cookie we've asked for and will then request whatever page it was at previously to executing this dark mode page. Let's jump back over to the browser and see how things are going now. Here on the index page, if I hit refresh, it doesn't look like much of anything is happening. Let's take a look and see, do we have any cookies for this page? It looks like actually I already do. I already have a cookie here called dark mode off. That might be from previous testing I'd been doing. Let me go ahead and wipe that out. I also have a cookie left over from an example we did in a previous video. Let me get rid of that one as well. Now if I refresh this page, it looks like I don't have any cookies there at all. If I check my dark mode box, barely even notice that the page reloaded itself, but definitely a new cookie, dark mode on, did show up. So what happened there was that when I checked the box, we put together and sent a request to our dark mode page. The dark mode page sent back instructions telling the browser to create this cookie. The browser then re-requested the index page, and the index page was returned and re-rendered just about as quick as could be. Could barely even tell over here in the browser itself that anything had happened. If I again get rid of that cookie, check the dark mode box, you can see it happens very, very fast. So we are creating our new cookie at that point, our dark mode on cookie. I guess the next step then would be setting up our script so that it actually makes use of that cookie if it's available. What I'm thinking here is that up at the top of my template page, which is basically where I am doing a little bit of preliminary work, figuring out what content this generic template of a page is supposed to put together, what I'm going to do up there at the top of this page is I think I'm going to create a new variable for myself. I'm going to call it dark mode. I almost typed dark cookie. That's an entirely different thing, I suppose. So let me make a variable called dark mode. I'm going to initialize it to false. Then I think I'm going to put together an if statement. And in this if statement, what I'll do is I'm going to say, looking in our cookie array, accidentally got $2 there. Let me get rid of one of those. Looking in our cookie array for a cookie called dark mode, what I want to know is if a cookie by that name even exists. So let me start off by saying if is set cookie dark mode, essentially saying if we have that cookie. And then as a second part of this conditional, I'll say if we do have the cookie and if that cookie called dark mode has a value of on, then that means that the user has requested dark mode. Remember again, there's the possibility maybe I have the cookie, maybe I don't. If I do have the cookie, maybe it's set to on, maybe it's set to off. So here, the first part of this if statement is saying if we have the cookie, and then the second part is saying and the cookie is turned on. So if both of those things are true, then we know that the user has requested dark mode. So I will take my dark mode variable then at that point and I will set it to true. If we don't have a cookie at all called dark mode, or if that cookie exists but does not have a value of on, then the if statement won't be true and dark mode variable will continue on with a false value. So with that little bit of detection then, that then means that I can use this dark mode variable in the rest of the script to decide what to do if dark mode is supposed to be turned on. So first and most important thing I suppose then is our dark mode style sheet. I could start by saying if dark mode. So if the dark mode variable is true, then I want it to load that style sheet. If the dark mode variable is not true, then we simply won't load that style sheet. So at that point, we should have our dark style sheet loading if dark mode cookie is set to true. Let's take a look in the browser. Hitting refresh, dark mode is definitely showing up. My dark mode cookie is there, it's set to on, and dark mode appears to be what I am getting, so that dark mode style sheet is loading. If I delete that dark mode cookie and refresh the page, we go back to light mode again. If I check the dark mode box, the dark mode cookie comes back, and again we are loading dark mode, so we are having our page show up in dark mode. Great. Now let's make it a little more easy to deal with without having to delete the cookie manually by seeing if we can get the checkbox to stay checked. What I'm going to do for that one is I'm simply going to go down to the checkbox itself, which I have right here. And what I want to do is I want to put checked, the word checked, the parameter maybe I should say, called checked, into that checkbox if dark mode is turned on. So let me insert a set of PHP tags right there, and I'll say if dark mode. So if our dark mode variable is true, then echo checked, and that'll be the end of it. If dark mode is not true, then we will not echo checked. So that should cause my checkbox to be checked if dark mode is on and not be checked if dark mode is not on. Again, back to the browser. Hitting refresh, I am in dark mode right now, and yes, my checkbox is showing up as checked. If I uncheck it, we're back to our regular mode again. I can see that my cookie has gone to dark mode off. If I delete the cookie altogether, reload the page, we start off by default in the light mode. If I check the box, we go to dark mode with our dark mode on for our cookie. If I uncheck it, dark mode off for our cookie, and we're back to light mode again. Does it work for multiple pages? Well, right now I'm on my index page. If I make it dark, it's dark. If I then go to the new page shows up as dark. Well, on my new page, if I decide I don't want it to be dark, I uncheck the box, we're back to light. If I go to the home page, it's still light. If I go to the show page, it's still light. But maybe on the show page, I decide to go dark again. Then I go to the edit page. It looks like it's doing a great job. Since that cookie is being sent in with every request, every link that I click, it's always available, so the server always, as it's putting together each one of these pages, knows whether dark mode has been set or hasn't been set, so it's able to easily keep track of what the user actually wants. Because of the way we put our script together, where every one of our pages is based on this same template, it made that part even simpler for us, as we could go modify this one page and have those changes immediately take effect site-wide, become something that we had available for every page on our site. So here, cookies made it fairly easy for us to be able to create a new feature for our site so the user can now browse our colors in dark mode if they choose.